What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jonathan. Oh, it's Wednesday. What's up? My cat. Her name is Tom. She's very displeased with me, but that's not my problem. Anyway, yeah, enjoy the one-off. You'll understand the intro. I Am God by Jonathan Howe. Read to you by Jonathan Howe. I am God, he said, sitting and surveying his domain. You might not agree with God, but that wasn't his problem. It was yours. What was God's problem were the underlings. These fleshy beanpole creatures couldn't seem to understand the vast power that was contained within the diminutive form of God. They called him Mr. Floof, or Catrick. The fools, God thought to himself, banishing notions of the underlings from his mind. Maybe today will be their last, if I have mercy on their pitiful lives. And what could be more pitiful than spending your time running around, toiling to no end? All the underlings did was wake up feeling good, leave God's domain, then come back looking exhausted. Maybe the torments of hell are too much for them, God thought. If they just stayed here, they would enjoy themselves more and could serve me better. God heard a noise coming from the dark place. He stood and stretched, arching his back and digging his claws into the shelf he perched on. The wood felt so exquisite underneath God's claws. He straightened up when the door to the dark place opened and the first of the underlings entered God's domain. This one was female. She called herself Maya. Maya was the better of the two underlings, unwilling to do anything with her day before refilling the offering tray. As she did all days, Maya moved to the ritual cabinet and removed the sacrifice. Catrick, Katara, breakfast! God resented the statement. Not that she didn't refer to him by his proper title, but that she mentioned the lesser god alongside him. Katara pretended they shared the domain. They did not, but God was done trying to explain. Here comes the lost cause now, God thought, as Katara sauntered around the corner. Thank you, Maya, Katara said. Fool, God thought, thanking the underlings even though you let them serve you? Still, Maya had placed the ritual sacrifice, and God was prepared for his part. He stepped up to the tray and devoured the remains of a beast placed before him. When God finished, he took a stroll around his domain. It was expansive, nearly 1,000 square feet. God did not understand why he heard the underlings grumble about needing more space, when this was already the limit God could manage. He strolled into the lounge room. As the name suggested, it was his favorite place to lounge. Underling Maya was here, eating her own pathetic offering and watching some nonsense propaganda from the magic window. Maya, God said, do you wish to end your pitiful existence today? God asked her. Maya looked down and smiled. It was a good sign. Well, do you? Good morning to you too, Catrick, Maya said. No, I already got you breakfast. This is mine. God let out a low growl. This species' lack of understanding drove him insane. Maybe they wouldn't be so useless if they spoke the perfect tongue, God thought. He turned to walk away, believing the conversation was at its end, but Maya reached out and grabbed him. Unhand me, you delinquent, God yowled. Maya turned the end of her appendage into a pitiful imitation of God's claws and began to scratch God on the back. On second thought, God thought, purring loudly, this may continue. However, next time I will end you. 30 seconds later, Maya released God and he strode away with his dignity intact. He meandered through the domain looking for other things to do. There was the usual activities. He peed on the second underling's sandals to make them smell better. He marked up any wood with his claws, and eventually God came to rest under a bliss ray. He relaxed in the warmth and the square it provided. God loved all kinds of squares. They were like miniature domains made just for him to claim. A different noise sounded from the dark place. It must be the second underling. God paid it no mind, preferring to rest in the bliss ray. Anthony, the second tall underling liked to call himself, exited the dark place. He would often stay in the dark place longer than Maya, but also returned later in the evening. Anthony walked over to God, coming dangerously close to incurring God's wrath, avoiding it narrowly. Good morning, Catrick, underling Anthony told him. God ignored the title. He refused to respond to anything else than God. The underlings spent time together, God watching them the whole while. Their general lack of reverence at all times was infuriating. Despite his frustrations, God wasn't sure if he wanted to end their lives just yet. It would be a lot of work, God told himself, and while I could get my own food, the ritual sacrifices are quite convenient. God sat in the square created by the bliss ray until its warmth faded. He stood, once again moving through his domain. "What you up to, Catrick?" Maya asked. Still, God didn't respond, but he did walk over to Maya. He rubbed up on her leg. Underlings made wonderful posts to rub up against. She laughed, removing the portable magic window she carried from her outer folds. A small click sounded from the device. "That's a good one," Maya said. She turned the window for God to see. His own visage stared back at him. While the display was crisp, the image lacked the deific presence God had worked hard to cultivate. "I look like a fool's common household pet," God complained. "You also think it's a good photo, Catrick?" Maya responded. "Your lack of intelligent speech angers me," God said, walking away. He found a great square to sit in, a window Anthony seemed to use quite a lot for meaningless chores. It often gave a low warmth, almost like the bliss rays. While God sat, his eyes closed, Maya prepared to leave. Anthony was over by the door saying goodbye when God caught a portion of their conversation. "Catrick peed on your sandals again," underling Maya said. Anthony made a noise of frustration. Sounds of heavy footfalls approached God, who still didn't open his eyes. What does the underling think he's going to do, God thought. Anthony's rough hands grabbed Catrick and wiped something wet and pungent on his forehead. God opened his eyes wide. Anthony held one of the sandals, having wiped God's pee back on him. "Stop peeing on my stuff, Catrick," Anthony said. "When will they address me by my proper title?" God thought, ignoring Anthony. "I'll be back," underling Anthony said. He stormed off. God let him go, rubbing his head indignantly. The nerve of underling Anthony. If God wasn't so tired, he'd kill the creature now. By the door, Anthony finished saying goodbye to Maya and she left. Then underling Anthony took the sandals into the dark place. God listened, hearing the roar of the beast. God did not wish to face that creature head on. The beast was the only thing which rivaled God's power and might. Somehow, in the dark place, Anthony and Maya faced the beast and still came out alive. God rested on the square, thinking nothing of Anthony leaving the dark place. He didn't care when the underling opened another door to a place outside of the regular bounds of God's domain. God didn't think about any of these things until he felt Anthony's hands grab him. God opened his eyes wide. Anthony picked up God, a most sacrilegious act, and began bringing him to the place of many doors. "Anthony, I demand you put me down," God said, trying to sound authoritative. Now that he'd come to, God noticed Anthony's lack of artificial skin. He still covered his lower extremities, but his upper body was bare. "Anthony, if you refuse, I will end you this instant." God tried to dig his claws into Anthony's arm, but the underling ignored him. Desperation and fear snuck into God's heart as underling Anthony approached the place of pain. It was a metallic depression which housed a portion of the beast. God tried to escape, but his fate was sealed. Anthony placed him in the depression, holding him down with one hand and reaching out with the other. "Anthony, don't you dare!" God started, but he was too late. A rumble filled God's ears, and the beast tumbled from the hole of darkness. It was positioned in a way that God was completely tackled by the beast, unable to escape. God howled, cries of utter pain and despair. He struggled, trying to escape the horrors of the beast. Anthony held him down, keeping God in range of the horrifying creature. "Anthony, please, why would you do this to your God?" He didn't respond except to turn God around, giving the beast a chance to cover every part of him. Fortunately, God's head was left out of the beast's reach. That and my underbelly, God thought, trying to comfort himself in the midst of the torment. As if reading his mind, Anthony reached out and took hold of a snake-like apparatus. He placed it facing up under God. Suddenly, the beast jumped from the device, attacking God from below as well. "Is nothing sacred?" God cried. He would surely end Anthony for these trespasses. God struggled again, straining his muscles to escape. Underling Anthony held God, restricting his movement still. The beast stopped attacking from below, and Anthony reached for something to the side. God recognized the object Anthony held. It came from the place Anthony had entered earlier, a space only occasionally part of God's domain. God strained against Anthony's hold, attempting further escape, still to no avail. The final straw was Anthony's cruel hand running the substance through God's beautiful coat. It was thick and smelled nothing like God wanted to. I tried very hard to cultivate a distinct scent, God tried telling Anthony. The underling didn't care, spreading the viscous liquid throughout God's fur. Even my smell is stripped from me, God thought, letting his awareness drop. There was no use struggling. Anthony, for some unknown reason, felt it necessary to punish God. He endured the torment, hoping that if he stopped struggling, Anthony might see fit to end it early. Anthony did stop spreading the horrible smell through God's fur, but then it was time for the beast. The beast devoured the thick substance, gobbling it up greedily and disappearing down its escape hole. The beast was ravenous, foaming with delight as it sucked away the essence of God. Despite having resigned, God's muscles tried to fight back anyways. His body stiffened, a poor attempt to hinder Anthony. The underling merely retrieved the secondary portal for the beast and continued his work. Finally, dripping and thoroughly humiliated, God's torment was over. Anthony closed off the beast's access to God, leaving portions of the monster clinging to God's fur. Instead of releasing God, however, Anthony picked him up and brought him to the space occasionally part of God's domain. It was a mostly white space with hard floors. Anthony turned on the light, though God needed it not, and plopped God unceremoniously on the floor. He closed off the space. Have I not suffered enough? God thought. What might I have done to deserve this? He found the closest thing to a square and sat on it, shivering. The door opened and Anthony entered again, holding the wrap of rough darkness. God moved to hide, but Anthony's hands were quick. He snatched God and enveloped him in the wrap. There, in the darkness, God truly lost himself. Am I really God? He thought. Would God allow himself to be treated this way? What if I am not God? He thought back to the moment this morning, the image in Maya's magic window. What if that is all I really am, a pet of these two? What if I really am just Catrick, and not a deity, set to rule over these inferior creatures? One of these inferior creatures was in the process of stripping God, or Catrick, of all his dignity. Maybe I am the inferior creature, just a common household pet. Catrick. Then suddenly, the darkness lifted. There, Catrick, Anthony told him, throwing Catrick gently out of the room. Catrick slunk away. His fur was damp, but it no longer dripped with the beast. It would take hours to return to its original sheen. But I will never return to being myself, Catrick thought. He perched on his favorite high shelf, giving his fur the time it needed to dry. After the ordeal, Anthony left the domain, or apartment as they liked to call it. Catrick was left alone with his thoughts. They were depressing thoughts, unable to ignore reality. How could I be God? Catrick questioned. He laid his head down to sleep. A hand stroking Catrick woke him up. He opened his eyes to find Maya. She ran her fingers through his soft fur. I hear that you had a bath, she told him. Catrick didn't respond. It wasn't worth the shame. Maybe it wouldn't have happened if you stopped peeing on things. But how will I claim my domain? Catrick thought instinctively. You have no domain, he immediately thought in reply, berating himself. But then Catrick looked around. While he might smell different, the space didn't. It smelled like God. And while the beast made a fierce effort, I am still here, Catrick realized. He straightened up, sitting taller. If the beast couldn't kill me or strip this space of me, then it means only one thing. Catrick shook off the underling's hand. I am God. And, I'm back. The cat's gone. She's walking that way. She's very not pleased with me. But again, that's kind of her deal. Like, I don't know. Cats do this thing where they act like they're superior. I don't know. It's funny, but also it's frustrating when she pees on my sandals. Quite often. This one-off wasn't completely autobiographical, but like... Anyway, that being said, I love my floofs. Oh, hey, look, there's Charlie. Hello, Charlie. Come here. No, cat. Okay. She's like behind the couch or something. I'm not a menace. She Charlie, come back. Now they think I'm terrible. I could cut this from the video, but I think it'll be funnier this way. Come on. Bede.